What is up, my fellow Bitcoin nerds? Bitcoin, obviously, that is what is up. Every year it is trending up and to the right, with a couple of exceptions, but in general, Bitcoin just continues to climb higher and higher in terms of American political currency units, as well as everything else in the world. Why is it doing that, and why is pretty much everybody wrong when it comes to Bitcoin? We'll get into that here in this video, and to explain why most people are wrong when it comes to Bitcoin, let's go back in time a little bit when Bitcoin was only $27,000. The following post we're going to look at was posted by myself when Bitcoin was only 27 grand. I know, we all wish we bought more when Bitcoin was 27 grand. Believe me, I bought as much as I could, and I wish I still bought more. And you probably have a similar story, or at least many of you watching had a similar story. And hopefully you were following me on Twitter at the time when I was begging people to buy at $27,000 a coin. But the point is, and the reason why I show this post here is to emphasize the point. Bitcoin can go from 27 grand to whatever its current price today is, and yet most people still don't care, right? Bitcoin went from $1 to $10, and most people in the world still didn't care. Bitcoin went from $1,000 to $10,000, and most people in the world still didn't care. And guess what? Bitcoin's going to go 10x from its current price, and most people are still not going to care, okay? A $3 million Bitcoin from the original time of this post, which again was from a $27,000 Bitcoin, so this post has been more or less true so far. We're going in the right direction, right? Directionally correct. A $3 million Bitcoin was a 100x, two 10x's away from approximately $27,000 of Bitcoin, okay? Those outside of Bitcoin don't think Bitcoin will ever reach $300,000, right? Now, obviously, at the time of you watching this video, obviously it seems much more likely that it's going to hit $300,000 for obvious reasons than it did back when it was $27,000, right? Remember, again, when Bitcoin was 27 grand, right, people did not care, right? This was just after, if you look at the logarithmic chart for Bitcoin price here, right, this was just after the Voyager collapse, during, right after the FTX collapse, right? People were like, oh, Luke, why are you Moon Boy talking about 300 grand of Bitcoin? Let's get to 30K first. Right? Whatever, right? And people say the same thing now. They're like, oh, Luke, why do you talk about a multi-million or multi-deca or multi-centimillion dollar Bitcoin? Let's get to that next little, 1 week price target first. Let's reclaim this little level first, right? People are trying to pick up pennies in front of a steamroller. But I want you to zoom out here and remember that most people did not think Bitcoin would ever hit $300,000, let alone $3 million, right? Even many Bitcoin people I meet don't think a $3 million Bitcoin is feasible. I'm here now telling you it is feasible, right? Back in 2012, 2013, 2014, a lot of Bitcoiners were out there saying, hey, the bearish case for Bitcoin is that it meets parity with gold, right? That's still basically the base case today, right? Except a $300,000 Bitcoin back in 2012, 2013, 2014 was roughly gold parity. Well, now here we are, well over a decade later, and that gold parity target has skyrocketed tremendously, right? Pretty soon, a $3 million Bitcoin is not going to sound that absurd. Pretty soon, a $3 million Bitcoin is just barely going to be meeting gold parity, right? Because we're producing more gold, because the value of gold goes up in terms of American political currency units. And so if you set a price target in terms of American political currency units, that target will forever inflect upwards, right? Yet, Bitcoin continues following this hyperbolic curve by Wicked Smart Bitcoin, the stock to flow model. It's one of my favorite visualizations of where Bitcoin price is heading. And my point is 99% of adoption is ahead. You are not too late to Bitcoin. We've still seen nothing yet. Again, I posted this when Bitcoin was 27 grand, right? Well below 40 grand, 80 grand, 100 grand, right? This was when Bitcoin's a lot cheaper. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is to say that if I posted this exact message today, I would get all kinds of negative, comments and blah, 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 right? We got this Jason guy saying, oh, Luke, less noise, more signal, blah, 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 whatever, right? As I explained to Jason here, that network effects have hyperbolic curves similar to this. And most importantly, on the x-axis of this visual here, you go from a cent to $1 trillion per Bitcoin. But on, excuse me, that's the y-axis. On the x-axis, there's not really a firm time frame, right? I'm not predicting it's going to follow this exact iteration of the curve. I think it's going to be one of these options though, right? This is where the chart was a couple of years ago when I made this post. And I do not know when political currency is going to die because I can't choose, I can't determine, I can't predict what the human beings in charge of America's political currency is, right? So of course you have all these different white lines of all the different options of when Bitcoin goes from something to everything, where it reprices the world, right? In the same way, you can't evaluate, you can't predict what the monthly change in gold price is going to be in terms of Weimar political currency units, right, as they collapse to zero, right? And so the reason I emphasize on this post from a couple of years ago when Bitcoin was a significantly lower fiat price is that this post got 2,500 likes, 500,000 impressions, and a lot of people were quite negative. A lot of people were saying this was noisy. A lot of people were saying this was extreme. A lot of people were being, quite negative in regards to this because these are trader mindset people. These are short-term mindset people, right? We got this Crown Crypto Crave guy who's actually a pretty big voice too, right? He's got 100,000 followers. This Jason guy, he's got 134,000 followers, right? So, this was not a very popular thing for me to post, right? Just when you think the line drawers can't get any worse, if Bitcoin were to hit $1 million, you're very likely looking at a much different turbulent world. It's like inadvertently rooting for mass destruction because it will potentially help your digital orange coins, right? These people think are really smart when in reality they are just being nonsensical, right? Bitcoin's not going to change the world at $1 million. And if you're somebody, even if you, are a crypto guy, whatever, right? Like people don't understand that $1 million Bitcoin is not saying, oh, we had hyperinflation, right? That's not a hyperinflationary event, right? That's $1 trillion Bitcoin, a hyperinflationary event, at least in the midterm, right? $1 million Bitcoin, the world barely changes, right? At $1 million Bitcoin at this point, because gold has rallied so much in terms of dollars, $1 million Bitcoin would no longer flip the market cap of gold, right? We're not rooting for hyperinflation. I'm not rooting for hyperinflation, right? And a lot of people, a lot of the lower IQ people, a lot of the left end of the bell curve people, a lot of these folks correlate the lifeboats with the sinking of the Titanic, right? They say, oh, you lifeboat maxis, you're out here rooting for the sinking of the Titanic, right? We sailed for days here on the Northern Atlantic and everything was fine. It wasn't until you stupid idiots, you stupid orange coin maxis got out those lifeboats that it just so happened by coincidence that your Titanic is sinking now. Obviously, you maxis are the problem. Obviously, you maxis are rooting for the end of the dollar. I'm not rooting for the end of the dollar because I want to see pain and destruction. I'm here rooting for the end of the dollar for the sake of something that is newer and better. And I do not want to be the hyper-accelerationist that wants to see the needless death and suffering of millions, if not billions of people in order to bring about that new and better world, right? I don't want to get rid of a chaotic system in order to replace it with a more chaotic system. I want to get rid of a chaotic system and replace it with a more stable system. And as I replied to Mr. Crown Crypto Cave left end of the bell curve guy, if Bitcoin adoption increased 10x to 5% of global adoption, let's say, do you really think a 33x in Bitcoin price is that unreasonable before inflation, aka USD debasement? Do you not realize that I am not rooting for destruction, but instead just admitting its inevitability? I am rooting for people to get off zero, get some Bitcoin, because I don't know when we're going to $1 trillion per Bitcoin, but that is eventually coming, right? You can print more dollars than there are atoms in the universe because there's no limit to how many dollars you can print, right? If you had to count every single atom, eventually you would run out because you would spend all the energy in the universe counting all the atoms in the universe, right? But you can just print more dollars because there was literally zero energy expenditure. There is energy expenditure to protecting the U.S. political currency system, right? This is a part of the whole military-industrial complex. This is a part of why America spends way more money than all of its other, allies combined. You've heard all the statistics, right? So there is energy in protecting the system of the American political currency system, meaning the whole pie. But you can create endlessly more shares of that pie because there is no energy cost to creating more American dollars. And so we don't know when it's going to inflect upwards to $1 trillion of Bitcoin. But the point is, the red arrow you see on the chart right here is talking about that $3 million Bitcoin level. $3 million of Bitcoin is not late. It's just a little bit higher on the chart than where we were, at the time of posting. Obviously, the orange line, being the price of Bitcoin, obviously it's gone up a bit since the time of me making this post originally, but that's the direction where Bitcoin is going. If you actually like this content and you're not one of these people that is very critical, and you're not one of these people that thinks that Bitcoin is going to ruin the world, please subscribe and to this video, to my channel. Please like it, ring the notification bell. You know what to do. I would really appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps you get more Bitcoin only and Bitcoin Maxi and Bitcoin Hyperbolic information, while at the same time feeding the YouTube algorithms that you want to see more Bitcoin Maxi content and you want to see less trading signal from these traders that instead have the time horizon of a little goldfish, right? So please tell the YouTube algorithm that this is the content it should be pushing. Hopefully, and you subscribing, liking, commenting, or whatevering to this video, hopefully we get a couple more of these videos out to the people out there that are being duped into these altcoins and being duped into these short-term mindset views. Because ultimately, in the long term, this is exactly what is going, right? That just like how Finney predicted in 2009, if Bitcoin succeeds, it absorbs all other monies, right? Now, when Hal Finney predicted that in 2009, right, before Bitcoin had a price, by the way, its first price of 6 cents, Hal Finney predicted a $10 million Bitcoin, right? Because at the time, there was less wealth in the world, and more importantly, there was, or not quite as importantly, but also something to keep in mind is that there was less political currency in the world in 2009, right? And so a $10 million price target from Hal Finney now is more like a $27 to a $30 million price target, right? A few years from now, it would be a $50 million price target, right? There's $150 trillion of real estate here in the United States of America, and a significant portion of that, I believe, is going to be refinanced into Bitcoin. This is why I talk about the Bitcoin loans all the time. This is why I talk about the Bitcoin mortgages all the time, right? This is very often what comes up in my calls and my conversations with new prospects as well as with current clients, helping them refinance their home equity into Bitcoin. And I think this is going to be the future, that Bitcoin is not going to take over the world and cause all this chaos and destruction like, some of these, naysayers think I'm rooting for. But I would rather, instead of a path towards World War III, I would rather see a future where we're refinancing that future, pulling dollars from the future into the present, pumping it into Bitcoin, instead of making housing more expensive forever, instead of making oil and heating and food and water more expensive for people everywhere. Instead, we can just allow prices to fall to the marginal cost of production, and we can let Bitcoin become that monetized asset as everything else deflates in terms of Bitcoin. But again, my larger point there is that we have $150 trillion of real estate here in America. By the time Bitcoin refinances 5% of that market, we're not going to have $150 trillion of real estate anymore. It's going to be 250, $300 trillion of assets in the world, right? And this is the same thing with the gold market cap, like I was saying earlier, right? You could look at the value of gold, or the price of gold in terms of, Weimar political currency death tokens, right? Or you can look at the value of Bitcoin in terms of, American political currency death tokens, right? Obviously, it's a bit of a different chart with a probabilistic outcome because we don't know at what point the dollar is going to blow out to infinity, right? But eventually will, even if it's a century from now or more. But the point is that you can price it in terms of these political currencies, but in the end, it's going to blow out. Like the dollar will die, right? Maybe not 5 years from now, maybe not 50 years from now, right? And I know that some of you would like to see that happen in the relative near future, but you hoping for it or against it's not going to change anything. The dollar is going to die when the dollar is going to die. And that very well may not be in your lifetime, let alone in your kids' lifetimes. But you don't need to see hyperinflation in the world. You don't need to be rooting for the collapse of civilization to have a brighter future. In fact, you shouldn't be rooting for that, right? You should be rooting instead for the sound system, for the superior system. And so what should you do in light of this, and why are most people wrong? Most people are wrong about Bitcoin because they are not bullish enough on Bitcoin. That is your number one problem in Bitcoin, is that you probably are not bullish enough on Bitcoin. You are not taking your security seriously enough because you're not bullish enough on Bitcoin, right? You're procrastinating your self-custody because you're not bullish enough on Bitcoin. You're not taking seriously the conversations you need to be having with a legal counsel, with an attorney, with a lawyer, whatever, about protecting your wealth against the risks of death, the risks of divorce, the risks of a lawsuit, the risks of a $5 wrench attack, or the risks of somebody breaking into your home when you're gone away at some Bitcoin conference because they were stalking you online for the last 2 years and you had no idea. You are not bullish enough in Bitcoin. And probably you're not buying enough Bitcoin because you're not bullish enough in Bitcoin, right? So I don't say these big price targets. I don't post these moon boy bullish charts just for the sake of getting people excited and going about on their day. I post these kinds of things to raise your anchoring bias, right? That is the other thing people get wrong. Not only are most people wrong about Bitcoin because they for some reason expect that $1 million Bitcoin equals the end of the world as we know it, but they're also wrong because their anchoring bias is not high enough, right? When most people, even Bitcoiners, look at the value of Bitcoin, they're looking at the next 10x, right? Whereas I'm perpetually, pretty much always focused on the next 100x, 1000x, eventually 10,000x, because eventually we will blow out to infinity on that curve. So that is my encouragement for you, is be more bullish and have a long-term horizon, because most people, even in Bitcoin, get that entirely wrong when it comes to Bitcoin. If you want to have a conversation about how to get a little bit more bullish, how to decrease your risk, and also how to turn some of that risk into risk that actually pays you instead of risk that you're paying that's not benefiting you, feel free to book a call with me. All the information is on the screen or in the description below this video. Would love to have a conversation. Obviously, I can't help everybody to the same degree because every single person is in their own unique circumstance. But my experience is that I've been able to help clients end up with a 70% Bitcoin denominated net worth within the first 12 months, right? That means for some people, I can help them triple their stack. For other people, I can only help them increase their stack 10%. But whatever the case, I'm sure that even after just a single hour conversation, we can generate some new ideas to help you increase your security, increase your Bitcoin stack, and increase the peace of mind that you have when you go to sleep at night. So feel free to book a call with me, although obviously, that's not going to be around forever because Bitcoin will continue just to rise and rise and rise in price. So thank you for being here early enough where you just happen to be here early enough that I'm still offering my time before it gets booked out completely. Thank you for being here early enough where you were here below $3 million Bitcoin, below $300,000 Bitcoin. And for many of you, you were here below a $30,000 Bitcoin. So even to you, I say thank you for being here, because I assure you, we still have seen nothing yet. This was true at $27,000. It's going to be true at $270,000, and it's going to be true at $27 million. You will not be too late to Bitcoin. So thank you for your time. Please subscribe, to the channel to support this kind of content and get rid of all the crypto trading degens. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.